Hey, folks. I believe you're out there. I was just warming up a little bit on this beautiful day. Just actually, it was just a little rock and roll groove from GarageBand. Great little device. I just turn it on and I got a little amp here and I was just warming up. All right. How you guys doing today? Thank you for joining Under It All. And this is episode 1. And in this episode, or in this series of little videos, live videos, well, live until you see it later, I'm interested in discussing, some of you may have joined us on Tuesday for our Alien Guitar Secrets Masterclass live. And you see, everything is working. Okay, good. And that was fun. I really enjoyed that. I was completely shocked at how many people were actually in the forum. And for those kinds of classes there, I'm happy to discuss anything musical, anything about the guitar, and I love getting questions. But I thought I'd put aside some other time for discussing and talking about some of the other things that are going on in my life and in your life, and to maybe go a little deeper than just talking about guitar techniques and stuff, which you can get pretty deep on anyway. But in Under It All, I've been noticing that some of the interviews I've been doing, I've been getting responses from people who seem to have an attraction to some of the more esoteric things that I talk about. So after enough prodding, I decided I would start this little Under It All conference and discuss some of the things that are a little more uh, along the lines of some of the other things going on in my life and perhaps your life. So in this series, no questions are off limits. I'm happy to do my best to answer any questions at all. Kind of a nice thing to do here on the internet with everything that's going on in the world right now, and people are home hunkering down, and I'm sure that the internet is blowing up. But okay, so I went through, and you guys are sending such nice questions, such really good questions, and I am going to do my best to go through some of these questions that are specific for Under It All. And of course, musical related things will come up. Okay, let me see what kind of questions we got. I'm really excited about the other love about your spiritual journey. Just like to know where you got your wisdom, books, audio. It seems to flow with Alan Watts' philosophy and the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. You're becoming a guru, buddy, especially after Vi Academy when you shut down the thoughts of the whole room. Oh, you were there. I don't necessarily believe I'm becoming a guru, though. I'm a guitar player. But anyway, it's a good question. And I guess for this first episode, it might be a good idea to kind of give you, I could talk about myself a lot. I much prefer to talk about you, but to maybe give you a little idea of kind of what that journey has been for me. Maybe there's elements of it that resonate with you in your life. So here goes. I mean, I grew up in Long Island, New York, in a really great little town on Long Island. And we had 5 siblings, and it was 2 really great parents. I had a lovely childhood. I really, when I look back at it now, it was really quite amazing. I had a lot of friends, and I don't think I was very popular in the sense that, some kids are popular. I was extraordinarily average. I don't really believe that I was exciting as a person, a child, I was very, very, if anything, below average in a lot of conventional subjects. But music always seemed to be clear to me. For some reason, it resonated with me. I understood the infrastructure of it. And that was always in my life and exciting. And I would always kind of look for musical things. But grew up in a great home. There was some challenges. Obviously, these things happen. My father had some drinking challenges, and he was actually a bartender and a liquor salesman. He was just this absolutely amazing guy. The support that I received from him for the things that were interesting to me, like music, was just phenomenal. But he had gone through a period with demon alcohol, and it was bad. It was really bad. Sometimes growing up, it was like little time bombs around the house, and it was a very Italian house. Let me shut this shade. Maybe it's a little better. And I learned. I think it was. I know this sounds extraordinary, but it was a great experience for me to have a father that had gone through that. And yeah, it was difficult, and I was very sensitive, but I had a great support group around me. My mom was fantastic, and my father did something extraordinary. When I was 12, he completely quit drinking. He was like, in the morning, and he just stopped, and there was never another word he spoke about it. And I was so fortunate that I got to know and bond with the incredible guy that he was. But as I grew up, my interest grew in the guitar. but there was always seemed to be something in the background. Uh, when I look at it now, it was just some kind of fear. It was fear, and what I realize now. It wasn't even my fear; it was just like collective in the collective, and it was something that I had inherited. Uh, but at times, it kind of there was incidents that happened through my life that kind of raised the fear level. Um, I remember probably when I was about 13 or 14, I was with a young kid. We were playing around at the railroad tracks. You don't want to do that, and he was electrocuted or actually burned severely. And this created tremendous. It was shocking. It was sort of traumatic. But we all have these kinds of things. And once I started to go out into the world, Berkeley was fantastic. I was uh, then I from Berkeley I went to Frank Zappa, and all through this, and there's stories about how that came about. You can find elsewhere. Um, but there was always still in the background this kind of unconsciousness, this feeling of fear. It was just a feeling of insecurity, a feeling of not being quite comfortable in the skin, you know. And it wasn't like that all the time, but it was always kind of there in the background. Sometimes it flared up, and it brought a lot of suffering until one day in 1980, November. I could tell you the date, exactly where I was. I don't know why or how, but I had a full on anxiety attack. It was incredible. I don't know why or how, but it just, some of you may have experienced what that is. It's this feeling inside you. It's almost like electricity, and it's just fear, really. And it expands and it creates more fear. So you can find yourself in a what they call a panic attack. And it was such a powerful one. It didn't let up. And basically, um, caused a tremendous amount of psychological suffering in my head. And this started to just seep into my whole perspective of the world. My perspective at that time, I was 20, was not a great one, of the world and people in general. And this always leads to suffering. How could it not? and But I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't know what was going on. I had nothing at that time that I could turn to and kind of research or find out what, because I actually thought I was literally going insane. So it got so bad at one point, uh, it kind of started to self-destruct because it was all ego and it was all fear, and I could probably point out reasons why now, but I couldn't then, and that makes it even more frightening when you're going through it. Uh, it's just the feeling of hopelessness, helplessness, dread, uh, and I was caught in it. And at one point, I found myself actually letting go of it, surrendering. Basically, the thought structures in my mind were, this is not working. I don't want this anymore. I don't know anything. I actually don't know anything. I don't know why this is the way it is. I don't know why this is happening. So it was kind of like a releasing. And I remember just saying, aligning inside of myself in a very authentic way, the idea, I just want truth. I don't know what truth was. I don't know. I didn't know spirituality, religion. I was born into a Catholic family and went to church and, catechism, those kinds of things. And there was things that, you'd hear. And basically, whenever I read anything that came from Jesus, I thought, oh, that's nice. I like that. But there was other things that just didn't resonate with me. That sounded a little insane. So, but there wasn't enough faith there to find any footing when I was going through this situation. And then what happened basically in that moment of what I'm just calling surrendering, um, I just aligned with the feeling that I just want to know the truth. I don't care how it comes to me. I don't care what form it comes in. I don't. I just want the absolute. I want to know the absolute. What's really happening here on the planet? Us, me, everybody. It was just one of those guys. I didn't know how to take it easy. Just intense. It was very intense. And I might even assume that the incredible amount of time I spent with the guitar during all those earlier years and even after that was an escape of sorts. I mean, I loved it, but it took my mind away from this torment. So I remember at that moment that I had kind of surrendered. Nothing happened. It wasn't like I had a religious or spiritual experience or anything, but I did feel a little relief. And I just held on to that desire to find the peace in this incredible mental turmoil that I was experiencing. So I know I'm talking a lot about myself right now, and I just want to get through it so that I can get to you. Uh, but slowly things started happening. A book appeared here that I've talked about it, The Magic in Your Mind by U.S. Anderson. It was the first time I realized that your thinking patterns have a lot to do with the way you see the world, and that you're in control of what you think. I didn't get it at the time. And then I started to drift off into more new age kind of things at that time. That was all I was even able to grasp. New age kind of concepts, spiritual concepts, because I thought that was going to be the answer. And it was helpful. It was very helpful. I knew that I had to change, and I went through a drastic change. So that period of deep depression kind of lasted from the age of 20 to about 21 and a half. And I remember I was on tour with Frank in Europe when I started to see some light, meaning some peace. And Bobby Martin was the keyboard player and singer, and God bless him. He gave me a book called The Complete Illustrated Book of Yoga. And that was the one that really started to help me to see the importance of changing what you put in your body. Because back then, yoga was very different. It wasn't focused so much on the stretching and the exercising the way it is today. Yoga was a complete kind of a practice that involved a certain type of cleanliness, a certain type of thinking, heavy meditation, the exercises, diet. So I threw myself in 100% because I thought, okay, here's something that I could grab. And it was fantastic. You know, I became a vegetarian, which felt right for me at the time. I had health issues that just vanished. And it was, I started to identify with being spiritual, so to speak, and started to get into all these esoteric principles that I was ready to receive at the time. And they're very new age kinds of stuff, you know, astral projection, and which is what Passion and Warfare was written all about. And numerology and things like this, symbolism, and all of these kinds of things. And they were helpful for a time. They kind of got me out of the funk. And I started to see some real kind of light, you know, just feeling better. But I knew my quest. There was one thing, a couple of mantras that I adopted. And one of them came from that book, The Magic in Your Mind. And that mantra was, one of the concepts of this book is if you're able to sort of plant seeds in your subconscious, they'll grow, which made sense to me in a way. So the mantra that they recommended was something along the lines of, I am becoming happier and healthier every day. Okay, now, when you're in a state of abysmal distress and somebody says that to you, you can't even, you're like, what the hell is that shit? I couldn't even say it in my own mind. But back when the suffering was so bad, you're reaching for any kind of straw that you can find. And I tried it. And at first, I couldn't even say it. And then I started to say it in my mind, but I didn't believe it. I am becoming happier and healthier every day. Yeah, sure. You know, that was my attitude. How can you find happiness and health when that's your attitude? Of course, I didn't know this at the time. So then I just kept saying it and saying it. And then eventually a time came where the idea came to me, why not? Why not me? Why wouldn't I become, why do I believe it's impossible that I can become happier and healthier every day? Why do I believe that? So before I could even say that in my own mind, I was already convinced, now the world sucks. We're all going to hell in a handbag. Everybody's an idiot. This is kind of like, that's suffering. That's hell. And finally, when I was able to say that in my own mind and actually say, well, why not me? Why not? Why not? It's absolutely possible for me to become happier and healthier every day. It's possible. Why wouldn't it be possible? And that was the in. That was another moment of, it was an epiphany, of sorts. It's like the time that I had decided, I don't want this. I want peace. I want truth. I don't know how, but that's what I want. That was an epiphany because it was an inner shift. And when I actually said, I am becoming happier and healthier every day, why not me? That was a shift. It was a big shift. And once I started to believe that that was possible, it started to happen. It's the way it works. Whatever you believe, I didn't realize this at the time, but whatever you believe to be true will be true for you and will be your reality. Like I said, I didn't know that at the time, although that's what was happening. It's happening all the time for everybody, like all the time, not just here or there, but completely. And so this was so wonderful for me because I started to feel relief. And then I started doing all these studies and all these spiritual studies, so to speak. And funny things started to happen. I started having like moments of clarity, and little moments of euphoria. Just the feeling of, oh, it's not so bad. That in and of itself, if you can find that and hold on to it, life is good. And I needed it, and it happened. And it started to happen, and it started to grow. And I realized my mantra was working. It was actually happening. I was becoming a self-fulfilled prophecy. I was just finding a little more peace and a little, more enjoyment. Then I made Flexible, and you can hear it on that record. I mean, it's just silly and fun, and it was a great period. It was a great period of discovery. But still, then what happened was things started to progress for me, and the next thing I knew, I woke up and I was a rock star, so to speak. I was in these fabulous bands touring the world, on the cover of the magazines, and people are writing about me, and I'm winning awards, and it was a surprise because I was like, what I didn't understand what they were seeing, or really, I mean, I sort of knew, but I just didn't think it was possible that what I was doing was making that much news. And the news, the music business is a small business in a vast world of business, and the rock genre is small business in the music community, and the instrumental guitar player is a tiny little, but it's there and it's my world. And I happen to have been starting to be recognized in it, and it was a surprise. But then it really started to blow up, and I mean, for me. And the ego came right back in through the back door. It's because it's insidious, and it just looks for an in. And I went from feeling like, who, me, to, yeah, me, And when this happens, you start to create an identity for yourself based on the things you're hearing and seeing. And it is very dangerous because it's an illusion. And that kind of grew and grew and grew. And I didn't realize that I was being taken over again. But this time it didn't show itself in depression or anything. It showed itself in just a sense of superiority. This illusory sense of, and I wasn't immune to it. It came right in. I can see it now. I couldn't see it then. And I see it now when I look at some of those interviews I did back then. They're just so pretentious. But my confidence was extraordinary when it came to what I was doing. I acted humble, and I didn't think I was the best or anything. I didn't even think I was as good as most players, but I thought I had something that was superior. And that was the ego. And I made an identity out of myself for being somebody that was superior. And that's the ego. And this eventually leads to more suffering because it doesn't last. This world is all about change. And when things change, differently than what you request for your ego gratification, you suffer. And this then was a period of difficulty for me, and I realized I'm not there. I don't. I've lost my peace. I've lost that playful nature. I lost my non-seriousness because everything became really serious. So my spiritual studies were always there, and but they went deeper than just the metaphysical New Age kind of things that I was exposed to before that. I discovered an Eastern path. I started researching a lot of Eastern philosophies, and it was an incredibly powerful path that required a tremendous amount of meditation. And so I started doing that, and now this must have been it was right around when Sex and Religion came out, or a little after. It was right around after Sex and Religion. And that was very helpful because it required the meditation, and I started to understand the great value in meditation and what it does. But I could never really get very deep because I always got kind of caught in the inner world, so to speak. And when you're meditating, your mind will be throwing things at you constantly, and they can appear to you in sort of images. And you have to be able to see even through those in order to get to the presence of who you are, which is the most powerful meditation. So my studies continued, and I remember I started to get into some, and everything came at the right time. Everything came, and that's always happening, actually. It's happening for you, although it may not look like that. But anything, and this was a discovery I made later, anything that happens to you in your life is actually for your best interest. Okay, now don't beat me up for that. It's not my rule. It's just the way it is. And it's a great perspective to have because it changes the way you look at the things that happen to you. And then you can start seeing some of the value in those things that look so catastrophic at times, because those values are there. But it wasn't until I had discovered some of the more profound spiritual teachings uh, that involved the self, the real self, not the external world as much. And for instance, when I discovered Eckhart Tolle, that had a profound impact on me, his teachings. And at first I was like, well, okay, so I'll give you an example. Uh, and this is happening to everybody as we go through life. There's various points at which we make discoveries, just our own personal discoveries. And they're very powerful, and they help us lead us to the next discovery. One of the things I discovered later was that everybody is exactly where they need to be right now. They're perfectly where you need to be right now. Everybody. And there's no exceptions. It's a brave thing to say, but when you see it. So this alleviated a tremendous amount of criticism that I had within me, because when I saw people doing something different or believing something different than me, I realized that they're fine. Whatever, if it's a religion that they're in, and wherever they are in that religion, whether, for instance, if you're a Christian and you're looking for the deep meaning of life through the words of Jesus, or a Buddhist, or whatever, or you're in a religion that's violent at times, that you've attracted that to you because that was what you somehow were led to based on the state of your consciousness. So I discovered everybody was fine with what they believed. It's fine to allow people to believe whatever they believe, just like it's fine for you. And this took the sting out of wondering how people can do those things, or how they can follow that religion, or be that of that political party, or be that kind of have that perspective on sexuality or any of these things, because the ego is always saying they're wrong, you're right, you're the one that's right, they're just wrong. And this is fucked up. All right. That's what suffering is. That just leads to suffering, like intense suffering in ways that you don't even realize, or at least that's the way it was for me. But there was so much comfort in allowing somebody to have their beliefs, and just, it's fine. They're where they need to be right now, and it's going to change for them. The evidence is in the past. It's always changed. So these were some of the discoveries I started to make, and once I started getting into Eckhart, I started to read some of these, other great spiritual teachers like Krishnamurti, and there's so many, but they were kind of the big ones. And I remember another great epiphany I had at the time. I don't know if I'm talking. Steve, are you on the phone? No, you're not. I might be going on and on here. I hope it's resonating with you. So I remember one of the great epiphanies I had. I mean, we hear that there's a catchphrase that we hear. It seems to be a contemporary catchphrase, and it goes, "The only time is now." And I used to think, the only time is now. I never really understood what that meant, Okay, Steve said all good. All right, thank you. I never really understood the depths of what that meant until one day when I was watching an Eckhart Tolle video, and it was called The Illusion of Time. And the way he said it, because when he says it, he's living it. I remember the minute I got up and I started looking around the room, and I realized the truth of what he was saying, that the now is the only time, that it's the only place where life takes place for you. It's the only place where you can be creative. It's the only place where you can do anything. Your whole life unfolds in your now. And when your attention is in the now, it's not in all of these chaotic, painful, distressful, critical, judgmental thoughts that are in your head that are holding you prisoner. So that's one of the powers of the now, is when you are giving it your full attention, you're not looking at things through the conceptual thought patterns that you've built through your whole life. So what does that mean? I'm going to try. So there's two kinds of reality. This is something I discovered. And like I say, I'm a work in progress. I'm not a guru or a spiritual master. And sharing things that were helpful to me, vital. And we're also joined at the hip at my musicality and my ability to express myself musically, and with people, and so many with so many situations in life. It's not just musical. When you make an interchange, it affects everything in your world. It affects the world, and so I started. Then all of a sudden, I started to practice this. Oops, sorry. I started to practice presence. I just started to sort of like bringing meditation into daily life, and what that basically consisted of is giving things your full attention without the myriad thought patterns, criticisms, judgments, labeling of these things. Because one of the realizations that had come to me was there's two realities. One of them is your reality, which is unique to you. It's the way you see the world. It's based on your perspective. It's based on your conditioned thoughts through your whole life. It's based on the things you were told that you formulated reality, a particular reality out of. And this is the ego. The ego is your personal sense of reality. And it includes things like your name, your perspective of your past, your perspective of the future, and it's conditioned. It's based on everything that you believe about yourself is based on what you've learned in the past. For the most part, I'm not, obviously, when I say everybody or everything, it's not everybody and everything, because there's everything out there. So what I started to do was what starts to happen is I started to see how this perspective is actually what I'm seeing the world through and creating my sense of reality, my personal, unique sense of reality. And the interesting thing about this type of reality is no two are alike. There's no two people, there's no two living things on the planet that have the same reality, the same perspective. They every whether it's the perspective, the experience of a dog or an insect or a plant or a human being, they're all different, but they're not reality. They're your personal pseudo sense. It's your pseudo sense of reality. It's your reality, but it's not reality. Make no mistake that the thoughts in your head that you think about yourself and others and the world are actually the obstacles for you to be able to see the real world. And the real world can only arise in front of you when you remove the obstacles. And the obstacles are your conditioned thoughts about things. Uh, so I started to experiment with this. And I started to practice presence with things, meaning I take my your attention, which is who you really are, the light of your awareness, which is who you really are, and you notice it's shining on different thoughts, and thoughts go by like this. Think about this, and then you add to the story of a particular thought, and then you have to see the results of this somehow in your experience. So when I started to look at things without any preconceived idea of what they were, meaning, of course, you know what they were, you know what they are. And the state of non-thinking does not mean that you turn into an idiot and you just, I'm not thinking. It's where your power is. It's when you start to see reality, and it's when you start to actually come in contact with your uniquely creative and instinctual nature, the instincts in you that are right for you. They're there and they're always at work, but you don't have direct access to them when they're covered up. The obstacles to your own sense of instinct is, in fact, when I say you, I mean our delusionary thoughts that we believe. So all these amazing things started happening. I can try to explain some of them. I know I'm not answering many questions now, and trust me, I won't be saying this again, talking about myself like this. I figure I should do it once, and maybe it will help you to come up with some questions that I might be able to help with based on this particular Under It All series. So when you remove the screen, so to speak, of conditioned thinking, meaning your criticism of things, your judgment of things, your labeling of things, your believing that you know what things are, when you just put that aside for a minute and you just put your full attention into this present moment, and you can do that with your senses. That's you see and you hear and you can taste and smell and touch. What you're really doing is translating vibrations. Our senses are just vibrational translators of what they're capable of picking up, which I don't believe is very much. It's a very the realm of frequencies that things like our eyes and our ears and can actually detect, I believe, is extraordinarily limited. But how do you know that they're limited when it's all you know? You have to shut them off. Well, not shut off your senses, but you shut off the thinking mind and you allow your senses to be present. And amazing things started happening. One of the first things I realized was the moment I was capable of doing this, even for a few seconds, just stopping the little voice in the head. By the way, that's the ego. The voice in the head that's speaking is the voice of the ego. And it's usually always criticizing things, stacking things up, labeling things. There's nothing wrong with this. It's there. But as we evolve as humans, we have to go beyond this. And that's what's happening. It's not like I need to say that. It's just happening. It's not going to happen. It's happening. It has been happening all along. And that's one of the things you start to see when you remove, because spirituality is based in practical reason. It's very practical. It's just based in reason, pure reason and truth. So I discovered that when you start to allow your screen of perspective to dissolve and just see what's there, you're dissolving your personal faux sense of reality. And you can only have access to reality, true reality, the other reality. I said there's two. There's yours, and then there's truth. The true reality doesn't have any opposite in it. It doesn't have any questions in it. It it's what is. It's the isness of this moment. It's undefinable, and the deeper you go into it, the more you realize that who you really are, not the body, not your name, not the bag that holds all of your life experience, but your awareness itself is the only reality. Don't ask me to explain these things, but I'll try anyway. Okay. So miraculous things just started happening, like just the simple act of looking. I started to see things I didn't even know were there, and they were in the room I was sitting in for years and years, and I didn't even realize it. One of when it really started to when that started to dig in, I was with my wife, and we were in Bali, and we were on this very colorful vacation because it's amazing down there. And I felt like I was experiencing heaven. But in a more literal sense, or I should say closer to, because what happens when you allow the true reality to show itself, you don't know anything. What you know, of course, you know on one level, this is a tree, and this is it's raining, or things like this, but you don't judge. You don't judge these things, and you realize you don't even really know what things are because you know the name of them. It's like saying, you know my name, so you know me. You can never know the depth of anybody until you know the depths of yourself, because we're all the same. And then other things started happening. Like, for instance, there was a clarity that started to happen, and even things like colors just took on a different dimension. And the peace that comes over you when you're not trapped in your conditioned thought patterns, it's amazing. It's sort of like, I'll find myself in my head thinking, and what am I going to do about that? I have to figure out how this is going to go. And if I can't figure it out, the wheels are going to come off, and we're all going to go to hell in a handbag. Shit, what am I going to do? And then what happens if this happens? This is the unnatural common state of humanity, and it's hell, because it involves fear, and that's what hell is: fear. And all of a sudden, I'll think, wait a minute, where's the present moment? And I'll pop into it, and it gets easier. And it's kind of as if, like I'm on stage, and I'm doing a sound check, and my amp is buzzing, and it's just going, and I'm trying to play, or I'm trying to listen, and then I kind of get used to it because there's nothing I can do. There's just this foundation of noise going on the stage while I'm playing, and then I just get used to it. It's like, oh yeah, that's the noise, there's nothing. It's the building, it's the whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, somebody figures out that it was a ground, Thomas comes to the rescue or something, and all of a sudden, quiet. That's what it feels like when you go from the torment in your mind to the present moment, and you feel it. You actually feel it. It's this incredible kind of oh really? Oh, thanks. And it's just like it's just peace. Some say this is the peace of God that passes all understanding, because you can't understand it. It doesn't feel like anything else. And then it's gone, because your mind, the ego, comes back in, and it says all sorts of things like, well, when I first started doing this, it would be like I'd look around and I'd say, well, actually, entering the state of presence has different people. It can affect people differently. Some people, they just go, what are you talking about? There's nothing here. This doesn't make any sense. The now. I'm here. It's now. So what? Well, that's a particular reaction, but you're not going deep enough. And some people, it can engender great fear. And I've experienced that too. And that's because the ego doesn't want you to know about it. And some people understand these things intellectually at first, and this is a good sign. And I see that happening in me. Something makes sense. It's a truth. And when you hear truth, it's as if you always knew it because you did. It's there because truth is practical and reasonable and real. It's just simple. That's the most difficult thing about reality is it's so simple because it requires nothing but your attention, but nothing more. And that's the challenge. You hear there's certain words that come up the deeper you get into this stuff. And one of those powerful words is stillness. And to really understand what stillness means, it's not sitting and not moving. You know, like some people, yeah, I'm being still. It's a form of stillness, but it's not. Stillness is the stillness of the mind. No thoughts, not no more of the little voice, and just. And what happens when you do that? You can there's stillness in the world. You can see the stillness in the world, but it's in you, and it's actually a projection. So these were some of the realizations I started to make. Steve, how am I doing on time? I don't want to go as long as I did last time. I think it was a little much for people, but all right. I'm going to go anyway because I'm on a roll. And I'm only doing this once. And then other miraculous things started to happen. And these miraculous things start out as practical realizations, intellectual realizations. And then you experience them, like the intellectual understanding that the only time is now can be the first step in the discovery of the truth of it. And then the deepening of it, amazing things happen. You start seeing the thoughts in your own mind that are depriving you of your peace. You start seeing your own actions that are being destructive, and you start and these things, they come to you in maybe perhaps words somebody else says, or something you read, or as an insight that just arises in you. But they never come from going back and forth in your mind with your ego. That's a downward spiral. And that actually has no bottom. It's like when you're trying to figure out why something happened to you in the past, whose fault it was. That's a good one for the ego. It loves blame. And blame has no end, because just look at the fact of it. I know this isn't a very popular belief, but going back and trying to figure out why, in and of itself, is the deterrent. Sorry, I'm waiting for a download. It's very hard to not want to have an answer, or not wanting to hold somebody responsible for your own unhappiness. It's a very difficult thing to do, but that's what we do. And the most important thing I discovered I'll wrap this up now. I'll try to take a question. In the future, I won't talk about myself. Promise. I'll just do my best to answer these questions. If I was to put a protocol or an order of some of the realizations, or the spiritual path, so to answer the original question here, that I've taken, it started out with incredible suffering, psychological suffering. And that led to a surrendering, a actually aligned desire to be happy and to not be suffering the way I was. But that was a sincere one, and that's all I focused on. And then that has to start showing itself in your life. And I started to find my path. And the challenges along the way are very helpful. I mean, we don't see them as such, but they really are, because they bring us to new discoveries about ourselves. So this beautiful, beautiful path has been unfolding itself in amazing ways in my life. Oh, one of the things that happens when presence deepens, it heals the past. It's hard for me to explain how that works. You just have to do it and you'll see. But what happens is your perspective, your distorted, fucked up perspective of the past changes. And when that changes, you're releasing yourself from your past. You're forgiving it. It doesn't mean you don't accept it. I mean, some people believe, well, if I just become present, I'm denying all of these things that are happening in the world now, or all those things that happened to me. No, not at all. As a matter of fact, it's the only way to properly accept things, because they're happening. And the state of presence says, this happened to you. This is something maybe it's something you did it, but it doesn't judge it. It just recognizes it. And once that happens, you're virtually free. You're free from it. This is the power. When Tolle wrote the book, The Power of Now, the power can never be underestimated. It's never ending. It will continue to evolve in you. Okay. There you have it. Steve Vai in a nutshell. All right. Well, I've gone for about an hour now. I will do my best to answer a question. Say, Steve, you want to call me? All right. Let me see. What sacrifices have you made that you have seen an immersible transformation of love that keeps giving? Okay, let me think about that. It's a great question. An appropriate question for under it all. What sacrifice have you made that you have seen an immersible transformation of love that keeps giving? The sacrifice that I made was the belief that sacrifice was possible. What does that mean? Most people believe that in order to find peace and love, they have to sacrifice something. This is one of the greatest delusions that the world offers. It says, and you know this, but you can feel this inside of yourself, when even in this question, it's in this question: what sacrifice have you made to find love? The question has a flawed premise in it. You can't find love from sacrifice. Okay, I'm going to do my best. Sacrifice is a mental perspective of humans. Only humans contain the conditioned, within their reality, they contain the conditioned thought pattern that sacrifice is necessary to gain something. And when it comes to love, that's one of the biggest deterrents in finding love is the fear of sacrificing something, because the ego tells you no. Well, first of all, it's important to understand that what you're made out of is love. That don't ask me to explain that. It's only something you can understand when you realize who you really are, what you really are, and you're not different than anybody at the core of your being. That is, and that's love. It really is. Um, I know this sounds kind of like peace, love. You're made out of love. You're love. God is love, and we hear these things, and we can get sick and tired of them because it's like, yeah, okay, I heard it. I thought I believed it at one point, but I'm still unhappy. So it's important to know, and that what you really are, your natural state. I was saying the natural state of the world is one of suffering and pain much of the time, not all of the time. That's at least that's the perspective that we have of the world, that this is all happening, and but in more reality, as we say, when you clear away all the conditioned thinking and start seeing the absolute unspeakable phenomenon of life that's surrounding us at every moment, and how everything is here for us, and we're completely we're already there. You're already there. There's nothing to actually strive for, that you can't separate yourself from it. And the most beautiful thing about truth is it doesn't require your belief to be true. So what was the question again? Oh yeah. So you can't sacrifice something to get to the reality of the love that is who you are. You can only see the obstacles and remove the obstacles if you have the balls and the courage, and or if you've suffered enough, or if you're just ready for it, if you're ready, and you'll start seeing the things that are keeping you from your own sense of peace, happiness, community, co-creativity, appreciation of others, appreciation of things, even appreciation of challenges. You will not see those things until you start to see the obstacles that are in the way. And those obstacles are always your mental thought patterns of criticism, judgment. That's another thing that you learn that the more presence is, you can't judge anything. And it's not that you shouldn't, you just can't. and the evidence of that is in the fact that there were things that you've judged in the past one way, and then you've changed your mind about them and judged them differently. All bets are off on your judgment just as a result of that, as being your judgment being the almighty truth of things. um, uh, so when you release your judgment, because you realize you really can't judge things, you would have to know everything that came before the thing you're judging and how it affected the world and all the people involved in it. You'd have to be able to know the reaches and the effects of the event that's happening that you're judging as being bad. And then you'd have to know how that affects everybody's life and the world from there on. How can anybody know that? The ego likes to believe it knows that. So you can't judge anything as actually being good or bad. It just is what it is. Of course, living in the world, you have opinions. I like this, I don't like that. This probably would have went better if it went this way. Next time this happens, I'm going to do that. I recognize that the things that those people are doing are causing this. These are all observations and are perhaps in your experience. But it's the way you're looking at them. So the mind will tell you that in order to find love, you have to sacrifice something. The ego will tell you. And what it tells you is, if you show affection, if you show appreciation, if you show compassion, if you then what it tells you is, then you're going to be weaker. you're sacrificing your strength. It tells you that you'll be vulnerable. That you have it tells you, and if you want peace, you have to give something up. That's sacrifice. You have to sacrifice something. If you want to know love, which is the question, what do you have to sacrifice? You have to sacrifice the little voice that believes that you're making a sacrifice. because what happens when you start embracing the higher part of you, the part that has appreciation, the part that recognizes the worth of somebody else, the part that recognizes the contribution of others, the part that instead of seeing criticism, it just allows, and that's what you're sacrificing. You're sacrificing your idiocracy. You're sacrificing your unconsciousness. But the ego will say, you can't do that because what you're sacrificing actually is me, your fear. But what happens when you do allow that, what love actually introduces into your life is so much different than what your ego is telling you from where you are right now. Because you only have access to thoughts that resonate with where you are emotionally at any given point in your life, at any given any time in your life. You only have access to thoughts. So when somebody says something like, actually, when you sacrifice your own sense of suffering, when you sacrifice these negative thoughts, you're going to lose because you'll be taken advantage of, and you're not going to be the boss that the people that you believe you are. Which is always holding you back. What you don't realize is that sense of appreciation, that sense of love. It's not a sacrifice. Everything comes with it. Everything that you want in life comes with it. It's the opposite of sacrifice. You're sacrificing every day when you're in fear. You're sacrificing who you really are. You're sacrificing your creative expansion. You're sacrificing the well-being of others. And you're sacrificing your life. You're wasting your life. I'm sorry I'm saying these things. I can't help it. But what you realize when you discover that there is no sacrifice in releasing these things, as a matter of fact, it's the opposite that happens. Your experience in the world changes. What you see changes. The way you look at the world changes. You realize that the only thing you sacrificed was your unhappiness. So that's the best answer I can give. Okay, I think that's good for now. Thank you, guys. I don't know how this is going over. And there's much more I'd like to talk about. I have a lot of questions here, and I would probably like to do this again. But this time I would talk about you. And that's why I'm asking for questions. So anything that you think I can help with, I don't know. It's an interesting time we're in right now. I would recommend experimenting with, doing your best to put your attention on some of the positive things that are happening in the world as a result of this virus that's going on in our seclusion. They're there. You just have to look for them. And once you start looking for them, they'll start to become your reality. Perhaps more dangerous than the coronavirus is fear. Because when people are in fear, they act out of that fear. No questions, no exceptions, because you can't act outside of the way you feel. And if you're in fear, the actions you take will carry in it fear. And I know it's incredibly difficult to see. And it begs the question, well, what are you talking about? Of course, I have to be fearful. If I'm not fearful, I'm not being responsible. That's a really good one that the ego uses. It loves that one. It loves to tell you that if you're not stressing out, you're not being responsible. That's a fucking lie. Um, so when you're in a state of fear, the only solutions you're going to have are going to carry with it that energy. So how do you get out of this? How do you get out of it when you're looking into the world and you're just seeing fear? And actually, you can't see fear in the world. Fear is actually an illusion. It actually doesn't even exist. You cannot point into the world and show me fear. You can point into the world and show me people who are acting out on fearful thoughts, but you can't show me fear. You can't point to it. There's fear. It's an insane premise. That's why spirituality is so practical and reasonable, because it points out things like that. The only place that fear exists is in the mind of man. Other than that, it doesn't exist. And your releasing of this fear is going to enable you to find things in the world that are more things that you can appreciate more. So I would say during this time, if you're feeling fear, which is, totally understandable, experiment, this is just a suggestion, experiment with seeking out things that don't include fear in them. Seeking out people who are making changes. It's happening all around us. I mean, I see it all the time. Right now, so many people, you don't have to hear me to know some of the extraordinary things that are happening in the world right now. People coming together, people helping each other. It's happening right here in my neighborhood. I'm being a part of it. And it's amazing. It's amazing. We come together. I am absolutely convinced that the foundation of humans is good. Not only that it's good, it is the good. I believe that about people. And when you start looking at that in people, that's what's going to reflect back at you. And when you start looking at that in the world, it dissolves fear. But you have to get past the critical mind saying, no, you cannot let go of this fear because you will be sacrificing your safety. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that insane? What it's saying is, if you're not fearful, then you're not going to be practical. You're not going to follow protocol. You're not going to be responsible. If you're not in fear, you're not going to wash your hands or all these things. This is not necessary. The fear is unnecessary. Being conscientious at a time like this, being practical, following protocol, supporting each other, washing your hand, whatever it takes. Does not require fear. And if you can do it without the fear, you'll be amazing at how the world around you will change. Because, and I'll leave it with this, and this may be helpful for some people who are really, in fear right now. And of course, I'm not trivializing some of the painful, horrific things that are happening to people. I do not mean to trivialize those things. Maybe there's another more I could say about that, but you've got to be tired of me by now. Okay, so I would just leave you with this. If you change the way you look at the world that you're seeing will change. It must. Thanks. I'd like to maybe do this next Tuesday, but it would be more of an alien guitar secret. So I'll talk all about guitar and I'll play my guitar and I'll show you things and I'll answer questions about music and your career and all those good things. And some of this stuff might seep into it. Let me know what you think because I know a lot of this stuff is kind of maybe a little eccentric or I don't know. I think a lot of you are getting it. I think a lot of you I think many of you already know this and maybe even living it. And there is no way to quantify the value that this will have on your entire life, your music, your whatever it is. So let me know what you think, just so I can get a barometer of whether this is actually I'm speaking to the right crowd even. Listen, thank you guys. I appreciate it very much. God bless you. Have a great day.